Forget the epic battles, the grand emperors, and the glorious colosseums for a moment. What if everything you thought you knew about ancient Rome was just the carefully constructed facade? We're told tales of unparalleled power, incredible engineering, and an enlightened society. But beneath the marble veneer, the truth of Rome was far more complex, often disturbing, and undeniably human.
For centuries, Rome dominated the Western world, leaving an indelible mark on everything from law and language to architecture and warfare. But history books, movies, and popular culture often paint an incomplete picture, focusing on the highlights and glossing over the grittier, sometimes shocking realities of daily life, power, and culture in the heart of the empire. Today, we're peeling back the layers to reveal the untold truths of ancient Rome. Prepare to have your perceptions challenged.
We often romanticize Roman emperors as strong, decisive leaders, and many were. But a surprising number were also deeply disturbed individuals whose reigns were marked by paranoia, depravity, and outright madness. Take Tiberius, for example. After a promising start, he became increasingly reclusive and tyrannical, eventually retreating to the island of Capri, where he indulged in rumored orgies and acts of extreme cruelty, governing Rome from afar with an iron fist and a suspicious mind. And then there's Caligula. Initially celebrated, his reign quickly devolved into a bizarre spectacle of excess and cruelty. He declared himself a god, tried to make his horse a consul, and reportedly ordered mass executions on a whim, all while bankrupting the state with his lavish spending. Was it true madness or calculated terror to maintain power? The lines often blurred. Nero, perhaps the most infamous, is remembered for allegedly fiddling while Rome burned. While that's likely a myth, his reign was certainly marked by megalomania, matricide, and the persecution of Christians. His architectural ambitions for a vast golden palace after the fire speak volumes about his self-importance. Even later emperors like Commodus, who fancied himself a gladiator and fought in the arena, showcased the dangerous extremes of unchecked power. These aren't just isolated incidents. They reveal a system where absolute authority could easily breed absolute corruption and psychological decay. The struggle for power was brutal, and often the most ruthless survived, regardless of their sanity.
We admire Roman engineering, their roads, their aqueducts, their baths. But for the vast majority of Roman citizens, daily life was a far cry from the opulent scenes depicted in films. The average Roman lived in multi-story apartment buildings called insulae. These were often poorly constructed, fire hazards, and overcrowded. Imagine living in a building where upper floors could collapse without warning, and a single fire could wipe out an entire neighborhood. Waste disposal was rudimentary. Chamber pots were often emptied into the streets, contributing to a constant stench and breeding ground for disease. While the Romans had impressive public baths, which were social hubs, personal hygiene for many was basic. Disease was rampant. Without understanding germs, common ailments like dysentery and various fevers swept through the population. Infant mortality rates were shockingly high, and life expectancy, particularly for the poor, was short. And what about their renowned sanitation? Yes, they had sewers, but they weren't always effective. The famous Cloaca Maxima, while a marvel, primarily drained stormwater and waste from public latrines, not individual homes. Many homes lacked direct plumbing, relying on communal facilities or simply the street. This stark reality often gets overlooked in the grandeur of Roman ruins.
The Roman Empire's prosperity, its grand architecture, its leisurely lifestyle for the elite, it was all built on the backs of an enormous slave population. This isn't a minor detail. It's the fundamental engine of Roman society, and its true brutality is often underestimated. Estimates vary, but at the height of the empire, slaves could account for anywhere from 15% to 30% of the population, sometimes even more in certain regions. These weren't just household servants, they were laborers in mines, agricultural workers, gladiators, educated tutors, clerks, and construction workers. Their lives were often short and brutal. They had no rights, could be bought, sold, or even killed by their masters with impunity. While some might be freed or buy their freedom, the vast majority lived and died in bondage. The famous Spartacus revolt, while ultimately suppressed, highlights the desperation and desire for freedom that simmered beneath the surface. It was a constant threat, and the punishments for rebellion were horrific. The Roman economy was utterly dependent on this human chattel. Understanding Rome means acknowledging that its greatness was inextricably linked to this pervasive system of human exploitation. It's a truth that forces us to reevaluate the very foundations of this celebrated civilization.
Gladiatorial games and chariot races are iconic symbols of Rome, often presented as thrilling entertainment. But the reality was far more gruesome and deeply ingrained in Roman culture than we often imagine. The Colosseum wasn't just a sports stadium, it was a theater of death. Gladiators, often slaves or condemned criminals, were trained to fight to the death for public entertainment. Their lives were cheap and their suffering was celebrated. But it wasn't just gladiators. Wild animals were pitted against each other or against humans in brutal hunts. Public executions, often excruciatingly painful, were also part of the spectacle. And these weren't just occasional events. They were frequent, elaborate, and incredibly popular. The thirst for blood sport ran deep in Roman society, from the emperors who sponsored them to the plebes who cheered them on. It served multiple purposes: a way for emperors to gain popularity, to showcase Roman power, and to distract the masses from political discontent. This pervasive public violence extended beyond the arena. Roman warfare was incredibly brutal, and the treatment of conquered peoples could be merciless. The idea of Pax Romana, Roman peace, often came at a horrific cost to those who resisted their conquest.
We often speak of a golden age of Rome, a period of unparalleled prosperity and stability. And while there were certainly periods of peace, the seeds of decline were often sown during these very times, and the empire was far from consistently golden. The sheer size of the empire eventually became a logistical nightmare. Maintaining control over vast territories, defending endless borders, and communicating across such distances put immense strain on resources and governance. Economic instability was a recurring issue. Inflation, debasement of coinage, and the enormous cost of maintaining the military often crippled the treasury. The wealth gap between the ultra-rich and the masses was immense and growing, leading to social unrest and political instability. Beyond external threats, internal divisions were rampant. Political assassinations, civil wars, and power struggles between different factions and even within the military itself were common. The transition of power was rarely smooth, often leading to bloodshed and instability. The Pax Romana was often a fleeting illusion, maintained by a delicate balance of military might and economic viability, both of which were under constant pressure.
So, what does this untold truth mean for our understanding of ancient Rome? It doesn't diminish its achievements in engineering, law, or governance, but it forces us to see Rome not as a monolithic, idealized entity, but as a complex, often contradictory civilization. The legacy of Rome isn't just about its glory, it's also about its profound flaws. The lessons learned from its periods of madness, its reliance on brutal slavery, its social inequalities, and its eventual decline are just as valuable as the lessons from its triumphs. They remind us of the fragility of power, the dangers of unchecked ambition, and the enduring human struggle for justice and freedom. By acknowledging the full, messy truth of ancient Rome, the light and the shadow, we gain a deeper, more nuanced, and ultimately more accurate understanding of one of history's most fascinating and influential empires. The untold truths are often the most important ones.
What untold truth about ancient Rome surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, make sure to like this video, share it with fellow history buffs, and subscribe to I'm Explainer for more untold truths from across time. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching.